you very much. So, over the last couple of days, we've had some really exciting and interesting presentations. We have talked very much about the history of the Berlin Conference, what it means to us today. And for this next panel session, we are looking at the future. The title of the panel is Africa Reimagined, the Routes to Total Emancipation. A couple of things to say about that. Africa Reimagined. This is an invitation for us to actually look beyond Berlin, to look beyond what we currently have, to the future that we want to see. And a lot of the conversations that we've been having, a lot of the questions that we've been having over the last few panels have very quickly moved from the history to the now and then to the solutions. And we haven't spent as much time on the solutions as many of us would have wanted, but we've got this panel. So what this panel is going to be looking at is, if we take a step back, have a look at where we are, what do we as Africans need to see to take us to where we need to get to? Remember one critical thing about the Berlin Conference in 1884 to 1885. There was no African in the room. Yeah. Africa was discussed without Africans. Over the last 2 days, we have had that opportunity as Africans, as people of African heritage, to talk about what was done to us, and now you talk about what we need to do for ourselves. And that's what the focus of this is going to be. The other part of the provocation is the route to total emancipation. And what do we mean by emancipation? What does it mean to be totally free? Again, a lot of the conversation over the last couple of days has centered on political emancipation, to some extent, during the economic emancipation as well. And some of the conversations laterally have touched on probably what is critical to both political and economic emancipation, and that is cultural emancipation, how we free our minds for the rest to follow. So these are the things that we are going to be touching on in this conversation. And I am delighted that we have a very interesting panel to take those provocations forwards. We have 2 of them online and structurally, so you know, I'll invite each of them to speak for 5 minutes. Sorry, I told you things it's 5 minutes each. Then I'll ask them a couple of questions, and then I'll throw it open to you so that we have a genuine conversation about it. And that session will morph into a general questions and answers about the entire program as well. So it's not just going to be about this panel, it'll be about everything else. So if there are questions that you wanted asked in other panels that didn't have time to get to you, hopefully we'll have some time at the end of this session for you to get those questions in. And if there are still more questions than we can answer, then we will discuss a mechanism for taking things forward. So, thank you very much. Our first speaker is Dominique Calhoun. Dominique, are you online? Dominique is joining us from the USA. He's a partner in Calhoun Meredith, and he's the 81st president of the National Bar Association in the US. Dominique, are you with us?
Hey, how's it going? Good.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to you. Good morning from Texas.
Hello, Dominique. So you remember the introduction. We'll allow you to introduce yourself and how you want to address the topic for the next 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Well, let me first tell you thank you for the invitation. My wife is currently 8.5 months pregnant, and we are anticipating a baby any day. But for that, I would have been there with you in London. We love London. We love to travel internationally from Africa and all over the world. And so, but for that experience, and we're looking forward to a joyous occasion here in any coming day. I would have been there. Let me tell you, it is my absolute delight to be here with you. I won't take the full 5 minutes in talking about my perspective, because I think that for all of us coming together, this is a monumentous opportunity for us to figure out how we move forward collectively as people from the diaspora. I had the unique privilege 2 years ago of serving as the 81st president of the National Bar Association, the oldest and largest association of African American lawyers in the United States, which also includes members of the judiciary and law professors. In that experience, I've had an opportunity to reach not only across the aisle with lawyers from various aspects of the world, but I equally took my own pilgrimage to Africa. I had been there a couple of times to Equatorial Guinea, to Nigeria, but also went to Ghana. And that experience at Asan Mansu was one of the most uplifting, tormentous occasions, both on each end. One that inspired me, and one that made me so enraged that tears came to my eyes. When you think about what has happened to all of us, looking at us not as individuals, as people, but as commodities, as land, as individuals that can help generate income for other people. And so this experience to me of collaborating, collectively coming together, thinking about a moment in history where there was no African present, but decisions were made about Africans, makes me wonder about today and what could happen if all Africans come together with no rhyme or reason to think about what would happen to everybody else in the world, but what could happen for all of us, and how we could generate not only economic benefits, but also cultural ties, and bring us back together as one, which is why I'm so delighted to be here and talk about these opportunities with you all. So thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dominique. I will now call on Dr. Biki Minyuku, former Vice Chancellor of the University of the North, Limpopo, and he was the former Chief Executive of the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as Patron of the Fatherland group, one of the organizers of this conference. He is also known as Olu. Dr. Biki.
Good evening here at this side in South Africa. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you. We can't see you. We can't see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. But we can't see you.
Good evening to you all, my brother Tim and Dominique, to yourself as well. Greetings from South Africa. Allow me also to just very quickly thank everybody for this immaculate organization that you put together, and to make things happen up till today. I'm not as fortunate as Dominique. I just had a very rough week, with unfortunately, if you look from the cradle to the grave, looking on the grave side of things, but life is still good. So let's hope that this discussion will be good. What I hope to achieve with this discussion is probably to take you on a very small trip, but having periodized what I think is important for us to discuss. Also wondering why even the Berlin conference was actually allowed in time when we have think tanks in Africa and the best of universities existed longer than when the Berlin conference was held, but nothing was ever said about it. So we have conspirators and culprits across the board, including even the oldest universities in the world that started right here in Africa, that said nothing about this despicable conference that happened and is still with us today. But that little journey is crucial for us to take so that we can now focus on the journey today. I am Biki Minyuku, and I don't like calling myself former this or that. I'm just I'm a father like many, And hopefully this discussion would be able to actually bring forth the values that I can add. You'll let me know, Nels. I hope we are in your hands. You just wanted me to introduce myself. I'm Biki Minyuku. The beauty of being me is that I've been in positions of trust and privilege, which allows me to even conclude now that the restorative justice has not happened in the world as we know it today, when it comes to Africa in particular. But Dominique will probably put some light on it and how best that should happen. We cannot think about reimaging or reimagining ourselves until the fundamentals are in place.
Thank you very much. And for the benefit of clarity, I am not Nils Alake. So for those who arrived late, Nils is meant to have facilitated this session, had to leave early. My name is Olu Alake, I'm CEO of the Africa Center. So just to introduce myself, sorry, I should say that earlier. Now, may I now introduce Tim Modu, who is managing partner of the CIDA Advisory London and a member of the Fatherland. Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Olu. You can imagine I'm the only one you guys can see. Other people can escape, and for whatever reason I'm here. So I'll try my best, but Olu, very, very much a privilege to be invited to speak here. And it hasn't been lost on me that all of you have invested an incredible amount of time in 2 days. So I'm going to try and make it as brief as I can, but not focus on the purpose of this meeting. So I start by saying, and I prepared 2 papers, one for 11 minutes, one 5 minutes, but I'll be in 5 minutes. And so, can I say, let me begin with the words of the futurist Alvin Toffler, who warned us long before today that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Today's gathering, this entire 2 days intellectual journey we have traveled together, is in truth the exercise of learning, unlearning, and relearning. It is a deep, necessary moment of unlearning, a disciplined moment of relearning, and I dare say, which is where we're here today, the beginning of rewriting. And because Africa cannot reimagine its future if it remains downloading just the past, the point Olu made. So let me take you to what Chinua Achebe reminded us. He says, until the lions have their own historians, this is my own way of putting it, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Well, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, families and friends here, today, most of them Africans, significant number, are rising. And we are finally telling the story in our own voice, in our own language, from our own epic center. I will leave it for now. When we come into talking, I'll give you my take and the direction of travel. And that is focused on what I see as 3 versions of Africa. Version 1, Berlin Conference to date, which was Berlin physical, Berlin coded. So World Bank, IMF, everything you see after the World War was coded. Everything was coded into system. 2.0, independence. So once everything was coded, We now have 2.0. You have your independence, but actually you're operating on your system, your operating system. Version 3 is loading. If we're not careful, it will still be the 140 years operating system that will be dealing with version 3. I'll leave it there, and we can then take it on.
Okay, so for each of the panel members, the question then is, what does a reimagined Africa look like to you? What does the next 140 years of Africa look like to you, if defined and when defined on our own terms? I'll start with you, Dominique.
Well, so for me, my perspective, and I think Tim and Doc, you've hit it right on the head. It becomes about being an informed Africa. From my perspective, being in the United States, there's so many things that the government, people of power, you name it, however you want to proclaim it, that try to teach us differently of our history. This is no different than what's happening in Africa. It's no different than what happens around the world. What they tell us as a young boy, I remember this growing up in a small town in Texas. What they tell us of Africa and what they show us is these images of individuals in need of assistance. That we, the United States, this imperialistic society, has the means and benevolence to make sure that we help out those in Africa. When you visit, it is filled with so much richness. It is filled with culture. It's filled with individuals no different than in the United States who are successful in their own right as business entrepreneurs, as professionals. That story is not always told here in the United States. Equally, here in Texas and many of the southern states of the United States, there's an attempt to whitewash the narrative and the history about what happened to our people, what happened to the motherland, what happened to those that came to this country, overcame the atrocities of slavery, and therefore how we got to where we are. I say all that because there's an education that needs to happen. And Tim talked about for the next 140 years, what could happen to all of us if we're not careful. The belief that I have is that being more informed, taking advantage of all the technology, of all of the advances, the communication, the ability for all of us to tell our story is more important than anything else. And if you want to reimagine the African diaspora, my opinion is that you have to imagine what it could be. And I don't think that you get to what it could be until we start on a basis and a level playing field about who we are as a people. So that when immigrants come to the United States, that we treat them with all of the dignity and the assistance that they need. And therefore, when we have expats that come to the African continent, that they know the history of our people. And that is where I think we start. And what's most important for how do we reimagine what we all could be.
Thank you very much for that, Dominic. And what you speak to there is quite interesting, especially given the recent amplification, I suppose, of organizations and points of view, such as we find in the African descendants of slavery. Procedurally, how do you see us then informing ourselves better, educating ourselves to be the better informed Africans that you state that we require to reimagine Africa?
So I'll tell you, as an example, this for my involvement in the work here today was when I was part of the president of the National Bar Association. And Del, I want to thank you for the invitation and the work for this, for making me a part of it. We talked initially about bringing together bar associations from across the world, that we could actually do something similar to this within the legal framework, making sure that there was an opportunity to talk about it just from that end. What does the laws of the United States have to do with the laws of London, have to do with the laws of Nigeria, South Africa, and I'm just naming as an example a few of them to which the National Bar Association has an affinity within across the world. I think that there's an opportunity here, not only for independent individuals, but organizations, no different than what I'm looking at here on my screen with the Fatherland Group. Tim, I believe you're a part of that. This is the first time that I've heard of it. And so there's an opportunity from an organizational standpoint for us to come entities, and those individuals, those entities that have constituencies within the African diaspora can work to develop trades within our profession, also can develop those networks for education. And so establishing our own pipeline for education. And I'll use the Catholic Church as an example. Those crusades were also about making sure that people knew the belief and the story of Christianity. And there's an opportunity for us to create our own strongholds that we talk about and we educate and we teach what has happened to us as a people so that those conversations and contexts are never lost. I use that example not as something that I've individually created or something that's so novel that I'm giving it to you today. It is true, in fact, the work of Dr. King, the work of Malcolm X, and those individuals that we pride ourselves on here in the United States did just that. That you would have something so-called as Sunday school, where you would go to Sunday school and you wouldn't just learn about the teachings of Jesus, but you'd also learn about those atrocities that happened to African Americans, and you would pick that up and make sure that you never lost the true story of what happened to Black Americans in the country. And I think it's our opportunity and the true experience that we have today that we can create like-minded institutions and organizations where we go around and we educate one another about aspects and then invite those individuals to experience one another culturally.
Thank you, Dominic. Biki, we have talked a lot about the political project that we need to undertake to get that emancipation. What do you consider to be the starting points for establishing that viable emancipatory project process? And you have a unique perspective of having done something like the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. What lessons do you think we can learn, or do we need to put, what steps do we need to put in place to establish that viable process?
Thank you. I thought you were going to allow me to even answer the same questions, but I don't know the procedures. Before I come to this last question that you're asking me, I would want to just very briefly say this thing to complement what Dominique has said. That Africa that you're talking about must look like me. It must look like, let's say, Petrus Lumumba in the DRC, in the Congo. It must look like Mazi Mboni Odike in Nigeria. It must look like Amilcar Cabral, even though he's perhaps Cape Verde. It must look like Stephen Biko in South Africa. That would be a reimagined Africa that we actually want. The reason I'm saying that is because of your second question that you're asking me. You know, the Stephen Biko has indicated that the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is in the mind of the oppressed. And so if we say, where should things start? It must be right in our minds. We have to actually reconstruct, we have to develop our mindsets. For example, we don't have a national psyche. We don't have a psyche as Africans, but it's not only bogging Africa. I don't think there is a national psyche in America either. With all due respect, Dominic, what they go on has nothing to do with that. They are all united if you go to war. That's about it. But when I'm saying we don't have a national psyche, we're even beaten by our national football clubs. The national football teams have got a psyche. So the transformative change and development of our nation states, and I'm particular by saying our nation states, starts with us. It starts with me. That's where it should start. And if it doesn't start with us, we will always be farming that to somebody else. Now, I'm sure that you participated throughout the conference, and I am sure that there have been a discussion about our orange philosophy. That philosophy is also accompanied by a methodology that actually builds nation states. If you move away from building nation states, you cannot bring about a new Africa. And maybe that's a bad idea to talk about Africa states themselves. And then they can decide what they really want. The reason we are what we are, scattered like nobody's business, is because we do not have a national psyche. And that's where we should start, to build our national psyche. Then no enemy can put us asunder. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you very much, Biki. Tim, you introduced the topic by talking about the various iterations of the operating system. Tell us more about Africa 3.0, because that is the reimagined Africa. What does that moment of reimagining actually look like? What are the factors already in play that we need to utilize?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked this question, but before I touch on that, and I wouldn't forget, it's very important, can I just simply acknowledge a couple of points that made by my colleagues here. Dominique, by the way, I'm taking you on the offer. I'm going to find a way to reach to you because we need to work together. I like what you're saying. Hear the strength. You're, comparatively speaking, younger than me, so you are part of the Africa 3.0. So I'm coming after you. For my older brother, Biki, unintentionally, you just mentioned a name called Mbonu Chike. But let me tell you, I have actually a great granddaughter from, how can I describe it? Anyway, a blood relation of Mazin Mbonu Chike you referred in this room. And that person, if I may kindly say, is my wife. Okay. Bono's mother, by the way, that's the man book. The book was written in 1946, called My Africa. He revised it in 1954, and he died in 1956 at age 42. And the connection is that my mother-in-law, Mercy, and Nietzsche, Mr. Nietzsche, happens to be Ni Ojike, niece to Mbonu. So you can see the direct blood. My wife, unfortunately, my mother-in-law died just this year at age 96. So, Biki, unintentionally, you've taken me into a family tree, but I will not deviate from that for a minute. You talked to us at an important point, which is methodology, and that will combine neatly into what Olu have just asked me. And can I say, before we get into this 3.0, we've got to know exactly what is loaded in 2.0 that we have to remove or get involved into it. And I hinted to you that after Berlin, everything before they gave us independence was coded. They started coding in things into systems. So you touch World Bank, you're touching Berlin in the 1840s, but it's now World Bank systems, IMF, UN National Security Council. Everything and institutions you know is actually all the things you've been hearing about Berlin and how cruel it was actually preloaded. So they actually put it into systems, even as we talk about the young people, AI, and all those things. Who's behind it? Who's got it? Who's got the codes? So when you begin to look at what really the task facing us, we've got to understand what is in the operating system. And we can name them. And we have the talent to, in each department, go to work to it. And this is where, so that's why I'm saying that Berlin, actually, while we were busy getting independence, Africa 2.0 was still running on Berlin operating system because while we gained governments, the world gained Bretton Woods, i.e. the IMF, World Bank, the OECD. So, and in 1963, I have to touch on this, 1963, our own OAU, under incredible pressure, actually more or less confirmed Berlin and said, you get on with the borders. But beyond that, when you start now looking at what the 3.0, so to do 3.0, I'll start by saying now we come to the present moment, right? Look around the world. The geo are shifting. China rising, fragmented Europe, fatigued West, Middle East convulsion, Pacific tensions, the Russia-Ukraine rupture, the technology revolution, i.e. AI, crypto, fintech, youth-driven energy across Africa. So the world is not merely changing, it's rebooting. It's rebooting. And Africa is entering this 3.0. But here lies the danger. For me, Africa 3.0, I've said it's exploding, but it's still on the Berlin operating system. So what do we do? Having just listed potentially what we know the operating system is, we have to unlearn all the things that we think we know and begin to relearn based on information here today, whether it's the youth, scholars, people like Minyuku, my brother, South Africa. We have to go back to the basics. And this is where Mbono GK did fantastic for me. Because the man documented what life was before the colonial master came, how we organize ourselves, the power of women, the way our economics, the law and order. If we don't know what the picture look like, we will not have the ingredients to operate in the new operating system. And our youth, our job is to take that information everywhere we can get it. South Africa, anywhere. Our brothers, African Americans, our brothers in the Caribbean, they are diasporans. We need the youth and the diasporans to combine forces, get the operating system, go back to the old and say what was documented before these guys came. Combine that, we equip our youth, and they will do this business. That's my take for it, for me.
It's interesting that you mentioned there, Tim, as part of the reimagination that we need to do, avoiding repeating mistakes that are embedded within Africa 2.0, the current operating system. And as we've heard over the last couple of days, there are now new global actors who are quite significant players and will be, or are looking to, if they're not already, looking to influence Africa 3.0 or prevent it. How do we navigate these new actors? So by those new global actors, I mean the Chinas, the Russias, the Gulf states. How do we navigate these to avoid repeating those old dependency patterns that have kept Africa 2.0 where it is at?
Well, partly, I think my brother Minyuku, when he was speaking, he alluded to one or two important points relating to the originality, which is what I tried to sort of. First of all, we've got to know, we have to have, Mbono actually called it dignity. You see, colonialism made us, to a large extent, begin to see ourselves as inferior if we don't get hold of that And Mbono classified this as dignity. And I think, Olu, when you were speaking at the beginning, you actually used the word culture. And I understand why you said it, because you run an important center, the African Center, which tries to capture the culture. If Mbono Jike was here, it will be your center that he will spend most of his time, because most of the things he did was to capture the essence of Africa. He was able, in fact, one of the things and the point you're making, how do we do that, is that if we don't know what worked in our time, how we organize it, we won't be able to know how to go into the new system. And I give you an example. In 1901, when the British government took over in Nigeria, 1900, the first expedition they did was to come to my own community, the Arab Confederacy. I'm an Arab, Igbo. And they took that war and they labeled them with all sorts of things to justify the war, the Arab War of 1901. When you go and look at declassified information of the colonial master, when they were doing their return to explain Arab people they defeated, the whole basis of asking for £98,000 was for London to give them the money to go and destroy these people because they wanted to go into the trade route of the Arab people. They won them, but they reported that they changed the currency so that these people don't understand. And so, well, we're taking you over, currency change, you have to tell us your trade route because you're going to use our money. They reported that the Arabs were too clever. They quickly saw their old currency wasn't good for them. They learned the new currency, but they did not show them the trade routes. And so the colonial office was reporting almost apologetically to the majesty then that, sorry, we thought that we could have used the change of system to grab the trade. So that already in the past is giving us a picture of how people of that time were able to still maintain their trade, change what they need to change, new currency, they realize it's easier for them, but they kept the secret of their trade. And so they were reporting in 1903, November 1903, if you Google it, you find the Colonial Masters report on southern Nigeria. You will find what the report and the whole data there, it makes it. So that's what I'm saying, it's in the past, which is Mbon was saying. The solutions are there, but we need to, that software, give it to the young. They are smart. We got to give it to them. Your center is an important center for that revolution to start.
Thank you very much, Tim. Okay, we're going to move straight into the final Q&A session now. Can I ask Dr. Gabriel Alake, still around? Can you please come forward? Kathy, the Young Africa Center, can you come forward as well? Please join us here. And while they're coming forward, can I just see a show of hands, any questions that you have? 1, 2, I'll take them in threes so we can answer them all together. And please let me know if they're specific to anyone or just general. Okay, I'll start right at the back, ladies first. Okay.
Good evening. Superb, excellent, love the structure, love the framework. I'm Robin Williams. The only thing that I saw missing through my lens is the psychological warfare, because we can have all the tactics, practice, the resources, but I think the campaign that has been waged against this runs for hundreds of years, and it is endemic, and it's such a cellular level that makes us ill prematurely and compromises sometimes our ability to move forward. So I would just add that to what Tim said and what's being discussed. There has to be a comparable healing, therapy, whatever you want to call it. I feel that we need some of that alongside all of those very practical and necessary activities.
Thank you very much.
Okay, when Dr. K spoke earlier, like the way he said that let's reason like That is a crime scene. Let's like, what name was that again?
Look at it, crime scene, look at it as a detective.
Yes. And we really thought about looking at all of this conversation, particularly going forward from a project management perspective, like for execution, to identify what needs to happen, the dependencies, the actors, the influence, the government, all of that, so that we are not just here discussing rhetorics. I don't want to come back to London next year and we're discussing the same thing. I'm a man in a hurry to see solution. So I may clap for you, you're saying nice things. You're not making a lot of sense to me. I need to see actionable steps to getting us out of this doldrum.
Thank you very much. Next point, yes, down there. Hello.
Yeah, my conclusion for a long time has been, unless we as Africans actually descend to the level of barbarity that global Europe has descended to, we will never get out of the situation that we are in. My question, therefore, is if we descend to that level of depravity and depravedness,
Okay, yeah, we had one comment, so I'll say it's you first.
Good evening. So my question is more on the point that you touched on, which is about, I think, phase 2, following the Berlin conference, about how these institutions were essentially set up and essentially codified how they kind of kept us in bondage. And if we look at it now, we're still under that bondage of these institutions, the IMF and the World Bank. How, I understand that you want to pass on the playbook to us, how is it that we're going to come out of these different systems and these different institutions to be able to create that new future without massive compromising of our people, if that makes sense? Because you've seen like Burkina Faso, I think they've managed to like try to nationalize things and like make things a lot better for their community, but they're facing a lot of backlash. So my question to you is just, how do we break out of these institutions? How do we break out of these systematic things put in place?
Thank you, and thank you.
Yes, I have 3 questions, but I'm sure.
but
The 3 questions can actually be crammed just into one shoot. And it's why do many Africans today remain unaware of the Berlin Conference, its proceedings, and its long-term consequences for the continent? What gaps in education systems or public narratives have contributed to this lack of awareness? And how has the story of the Berlin Conference been told within African historiography? And what aspects remain unstudied and misunderstood?
Education, yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Peter Howard from recently back from Nairobi. Just one question, but as a revolutionary question. We can talk all we like, but there is, for my mind, a major impediment. We have presidents and regimes on the continent that are our biggest enemies. So unless you remove BA from Cameroon, Ruto from Kenya, the president of Tanzania, who just executed 800 of their citizens, Uganda, where Museveni has put his family in power in every institution there is, and the same with Kagame. We can talk all we like, but the partnership that the UAE has with African leaders in Sudan, the UAE has with the Tanzanian regime, and all over the continent, we have people who will not be removed unless it's by revolution. So for me, the problem is, to what extent can we here in the diaspora affect change, which is systemic, which is lasting and enduring? And just to give one little example, if you go all over Kenya at the moment, you will see White Father Christmases on sale. So from the serious to the superficial, we are still in serious mental slavery on the continent, where most people live on less than $1 a day. And the question is not about Pan-Africanism, is what am I going to eat tonight or tomorrow? Just a reality check for the revolution.
Thank you very much. We've got 5 questions there, which we can actually collapse into two broad themes, and that is the first is about actionable steps, because that's what most of the questions really are alluding to. What are the actionable steps that we need to take to get to the point of emancipation and into a sustainable Africa 3.0? And that question really is not just for the conversation as well. But while you're thinking about the answer, let me go to Dominique. Dominique.
I've heard all of those questions or statements. They're all spot on. I'm going to try to take them, in my opinion, and condense them the best that I can. My father told me when I was a kid, if you break down the statement of history, the word history, it's his story. Whoever the victor is able to tell his story, as it was told to me by my dad. And as it always comes, it's about how the storytelling goes to where you identify the victors versus those who lost. So a couple of things. Number one, to the sister that spoke first, I didn't catch a name, but she talked about the psychological warfare that goes along with what has happened to the African diaspora. And I will be clear, just from my perspective of being an American, what you have all experienced about the stories of your people, of our people, excuse me, and where they exist are no different that the Black people have done XYZ. They're the ones that create the highest number of murders. They're the ones that have theft. They're the ones that can't do whatever the case may be. And that has been the colonistic statement that has gone along with the anvils of time. And so when you talk about this psychology of what happens to our people and when can we ever come back together, I think that it all looks at the economics to how you change this. So to the brother that spoke about the governmental regimes that are looking at what happens to various people and where their next meal is coming from, that is an economic statement. So just from the American and understanding the ways of how things work here in the United States and what I've seen happen all over the world. When it comes down to how do you influence government, how do you influence change, it's always about where the money comes from and how the dollar works. Today, you have a Chinese government, as Tim identified and alluded to, that is working hard to influence not only African governments, but governments all over the world to become the new empire or back to being the imperialistic state that it was at one point. For us, there is an opportunity to create partnership and not enslavement that will eventually assist our people. And so what I would say to everything and all the comments that I've heard is that first, you can't be looking for a quick fix solution. Something here in the United States called Project 2025, which is what put Trump into office, and a number of the different policies that you hear about in the United States was a 50-year plan that took all that time to come to fruition. This is going to be no different than that. It is going to take 50 years, if not more, generations, I would say at least 2, for us to collectively work together and find the solutions that we need. And in my opinion, that is something that we have to prepare for, to acknowledge that it will take that much time and that you can't be assuaged by how much the effort is going to require. And then the second thing I would say is that we have to look at those economic levers that we can actually deploy immediately and those that need to take time so that you can actually find the benefits with one another. And so the opportunities and the opportunity zones to work in the United States or to Kenya or to Egypt or to Nigeria, wherever that case may be, we need to find those people, implement them into not only the government, but also in the economic engine that can begin to facilitate that change. And I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Gabriel, you in your presentation, you proffered one of the structural solutions to a reimagined Africa via the Orange Union. I put it to you that the Orange Union is a romanticized look back at pre-colonial Africa that has no basis in reality and does not have a functional process for the future. What would your succinct response to that?
So, first of all, what the Orange Union is saying is that Africans should look in the mirror. That's the first thing. If you look in the mirror, you see yourself as African. Now, yes, we know, if you look at the diaspora, it may seem difficult, and that's why I don't want to rely on the diaspora entirely. I believe the diaspora is looking at the mother continent for inspiration. Right. So if the mother continent looks into the mirror, what does it see? Does it see a Europeanized terrain? Or does it see a truly African terrain? Africa cannot exist without its ancestors. If you deny yourself, if you cannot self-identify, you can never develop. If I come to you and ask you, where are you from? And you struggle to tell me where you're from, I'm not going to bother to ask you where I should go. A of mine asked myself and a long-term friend of mine, we've been mutual friends for about 28 years, and he asked us, by the way, he said, what language do you speak in your country? And I looked at Harry, and Harry looked at me. We couldn't tell him. It took us 10 seconds. And Harry said, well, we speak different languages, but our language is English. And the poor man went pale. Now, so we don't realize how serious the problem is. If Africa looks in the mirror and cannot see Africa, then you are wasting your time. So it is important to make sure that when you look in the mirror, you know where your identity is coming from authentically. If you look in the mirror with your thousands of years of history, culture, heritage, and you can't see that, and all you see is a business that started in Berlin 140 years ago, you are more than pathetic. That is the truth. So what the Orange Union is all about is making sure that you get your real identity correct as the base. Because as the host, if you want to welcome the diaspora, you're not going to welcome them as a German or a French or even an English. You're going to have to welcome them as a Yoruba, or a Hausa, or Itchakiri, or Ga, Ewe, and Ndebele, Kikuyu. You must start from there. If you don't go back, you will not go forwards. It's very simple.
Thank you, Gabriel. We have a couple of questions online.
Yeah, we'll just take final two questions
Yeah.
online, and then we're going to have to wrap up,
Okay.
unfortunately. One of them is from Rita, and I think it's directed at you, Kathy, asking from the Young Africa Centre's point of view what your key takeaways would be in in terms of this question of the future from Berlin. And then a question for the broader panel, which was around the African Union's Agenda 2063. How far has Africa gone with the Africa We Want agenda in the Agenda 2063 at the African?
Okay, so Kathy can take the first one, and Biki, if you can take the second question.
I think some of our key takeaways, these are conversations that we have as a young Afro-centered committee, is actually looking at this almost like a cake in a way that each of us can approach solutions from the perspective that we have skills within. So if I give an example, entrepreneurship, there's a lot of young Africans in the diaspora that want to do business on the continent. Some really great examples of those that are already doing that is one of our alumni, Julia Bote, who has an organization called Yendi Skin that's actually looking at ways of improving channels, supplies, and creating cooperatives in Ghana. But that's an example of how you can use maybe something like entrepreneurship as a way to actually think about how we can improve economic outcomes as well as social outcomes from the information, the knowledge, as well as the skills and the understanding. So just maybe my contribution to the conversation, and especially if we're thinking about what's next in the future, I think it's about thinking about how you can take responsibility, how you can be an actor, and actually think about the skills that you have, but entrepreneurship being one of those avenues, as you can actually directly impact communities. And I think for me, the types of entrepreneurships that I admire most are those that have an understanding of the local context, but also, you know, it's not extractive, but you're actually thinking about how you can rebuild as well as bring in other opportunities locally as well. So, you know, one takeaway for us, something that we always talk about is how can we also be actors and players, maybe looking at even entrepreneurship as well.
Thank you, Kathy. Biki, Africa 2063. Presumably everyone knows of the AU 2063.
Yes.
If you don't have that, look it up. But it's Africa's response to the failures of imminent failures of the SDGs effectively. That was an African solution to the African development issues.
Abby, can I say something?
Yes.
Yes, you're on.
You got the question.
Yes. Yes, Biki, waiting.
Just two quick things. Sometimes with the struggles in Africa, particularly on the political front, I think that question has been asked before. We think we have won when actually the struggle has been lost. If you look at the case of South Africa, and I just want to give you very quick examples of it, is that we tend to have lost focus. If we understand the strategies of the enemy, then it is good to counter and perhaps do a revolution, as it was mentioned. Remember that the Berliners were able to turn mercenaries into missionaries, but those missionaries ended up actually being the ones that assassinate our people. Think about what happened to all this, let's say Walter Rodney, for example, in 1980, or you can even go to Patrice Lumumba, or you can go to Amilcar Cabral. All of them actually had ideas of how Africa can be turned. But these guys expropriated land. These guys has a formula that must be debugged, as my brother Tim has said, because it's not just about expropriating land, it is also about appropriating what doesn't belong to them, to themselves. And all of it is very much illegal. But we actually have not taken action, whether it's cocoa, whether it's mineral resources that they are taking. As Africa, we have not taken action against that, whether it's artifacts. And all of them are actually illegal. So if we want a revolution, sometimes that revolution should simply be by way of a stroke of a pen. They need to bring back what doesn't belong to them. And in essence, they can, because it doesn't belong to them. They will never show you a document signed that actually they bought anything. They just, if you consider South Africa as a case, the diamond mines were actually expropriated without compensation. We know how the Rothschild works. So we know the culprits, but we actually are not taking the relevant action. We cozy to the real people that their intentions are never good. I talked about restorative justice. That is in line with the people who actually have been terribly misdone by the systems. But just to conclude, what I wanted to say is this, that the question that was asked about psychological warfare is actually a very good one. But we tend to do psychological warfare against ourselves. We tend to do political encroachment, politics of encroachment in our countries. And it's a similar question that was raised about the leadership across Africa. They don't care about the people. And they still go back to the very same people we call enemies. And so the revolution has not really started if we are to be serious. That's why I say it must start in our minds as well. But perhaps, and this is my parting shot of it, we need to take serious legal action, because if you think about all the culprits in the South African context, they have legacies. They have legacies in South Africa. What the students could do is to say Rhodes must fall, but the actual assets that Rhodes owns still today are there. The statue can fall, but the assets are there. We need to recover them. And then we can come back next year and talk about the same thing. But as long as we don't take that legal action on illegal things that have happened to Africa, we're literally glorifying, under the rubric of a struggle, the atrocities that has happened to Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Biki. We could go on, but unfortunately we can't. We are already 6 minutes over the time. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please give your panel for the remarks?
I'll just spend 5 minutes by way of a vote of thanks to all who have made this possible. Let me start with Nels Abbey, who's not with us now. Journalist, please look him up. BBC man. He also runs an organization called Uppity that has very fascinating discussions monthly. Please look him up. Nels Abbey, thank you very much for your contribution in comparing this occasion. Let me secondly thank Mr. Olu Alake, the Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Centre. Fatherland Group was the one that conceived this conference. It was inspired by Mr. Nels Abbey, who told me that this is the 140th anniversary of the Berlin Conference. But for that little voice that whispered in my ear, we would have missed this significant anniversary. The establishment allowed it to slip away. In fact, they were hoping that we were asleep and we wouldn't actually pick it up. So Nels Abbey was the one who tipped me off, and that led to the Africa Centre, who were also thinking in that direction. And so we became fellow travelers in this project of a commemoration of this significant anniversary. And then next have to mention Ford, Mr. Oyekachi Wambu, who is not physically with us here. He was the one that participated in the pre-recorded conversation. But Ford is represented by Mr. Paul Asquith, who has been working non-stop behind the scenes here, letting people in, controlling slides, controlling time. He's been an absolute and
just quickly, I think it would be in order for us to send our condolences to Onyekachi, who is gone to Nigeria for the burial of his late mother.
Indeed. Thank you for reminding me of that. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Ford now deserves even extra mention because you see, this conference was supposed to have taken place in Lagos, Nigeria, in the first week of November. And the university that was supposed to have hosted this event was the University of Lagos. But somebody remarked earlier that the remarkable thing about the state of affairs in Africa, not just Nigeria, is that history has been taken off the syllabus. So a discussion, a conference proposed to discuss the Berlin Conference was perceived as potentially seditious, that it might be a seditious gathering, and the academics in the University of Lagos, blessed, died for cover. And we never heard from them again. And it was thanks to Oyekachi, who now said, we have a relationship with the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS University of London. And so I take the opportunity to thank SOAS University of London for hosting. I must specifically mention Dr. Ida Hajiv Vajanis, who's the chair of the Center for African Studies, otherwise known as CAT, of SOAS University of London. Thank you very much. I must thank all the speakers, the professors, Alan Lester, Penelope Caulfield, Hakeem Adi. I must thank Dr. Esteban Salas, who was speaking earlier. I must mention a late addition to the agenda in the form and the presence of Bishop Matthew Kuka of the Kuka Center, Nigeria. He was an alumnus of this establishment, and he offered some very supporting comments yesterday evening. I must thank our young man in America, Dominique de Calhoun, the youngest president of the oldest organization of African American. I'll actually say Africans in America rather than African American. Yes. Africans in America, a lawyers' organization. I think they number in the order of 70,000 members, and they were celebrating their centenary. Yeah, so thank you very much, Dominique. I must thank my namesake. My namesake, Dr. Biki Minyuku. We swap names, you see. He goes around in South Africa calling himself Bidun, right? I go around here with more credit because he was the chief executive of, and appointed by Mandela himself, chief executive of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So, Doctor, my namesake, I don't call him by name, my namesake, I thank you, especially in circumstances where he was bereaved threefold in very recent times. And he's supposed to be at a funeral, but here he is with us. He realized the importance of the topic. Next, I must thank my colleagues on the Fatherland group, Dr. Gabriel Eke and Mr. Timothy Modu. I thank the Young Africa Center, ably represented by their president. Is that the right title? Chair. Their chair, right here. I have to confess that what worried me about their conversation was that they were as young as they were referring to the next generation. That was scary. I normally feel very, very young. And when I see young people like that referring to the next generation, I'm now an ancestor. Very, very troubling indeed. But what about, I must also thank the SOAS University of London catering. We put them to extremities as far as this event is concerned. And please extend our thank you to them. We're really, really grateful for their flexibility. Finally, I touch on next steps. What next? It's interesting, this Orange Union solution that we've put forward and aired today. And it's interesting because there's some things, I mean, Mr. Trump gets everybody's back up in one word or the other. But there are some, occasionally, a little gem drops if we listen without prejudice. And there was something interesting in his national security statements. That we're rowing away from globalization and we're cycling back towards the restoration of sovereignty. And that is very significant in the context of the Orange Union conversation. Specifically, in terms of next steps, Fatherland Group, and people say, what is Fatherland Group? Go to fatherlandgroup.org. It is a network of some of the very best minds that Nigeria produces, but it goes beyond Nigeria. Because as you heard, Dr. Biki Minyuku is a patron of Fatherland Group. They're in South Africa. I have another patron of the group in the presence of Miss Jo Wellian, right there. She may look English, but she rejects that description. She said, she's an original. She's an original Brit, Geordie, no English, and it goes to the heart of the identity question, doesn't it? But the pledge is that we're going to continue this partnership. The partnership with the Africa Centre, the partnership with Afford, the partnership with CAS, SOAS University of London, in order to continue the dialogue towards the solution. They met for 4 months in deliberation about how to carve the continent up. We are not going to solve the problem in a 2-day conversation. It's the beginning of the dialogue towards the solution of these legacy problems. And last of all, I want to thank especially you who've come in person. And it's always draw the analogy with football, that there are those who watch at home on the TV, but it is those in the stadium that make the occasion and make the event. And I want to thank you, those of you who in person came here to the stadium to sail this particular ship. It's going to be a fantastic destination. Thank you all very much indeed.